I see trans people being the first casualties of many. It starts off with Skrmetti. It starts off with gender-affirming care for children. But next year, what will it be? Other people's reproductive rights, ability to choose, and so many other things are also at stake here. And we have to understand that the models that we have come to rely on, we can't rely on those models anymore. They're not there, baby. Let it go. Create new paradigms. We need to join forces. We need to lock arms. We need to say enough of this. Down with white supremacy, down with fascism, down with all of these things that are designed to keep the wool over our eyes.
Welcome to episode 253 of the Refuse Fascism podcast, a podcast brought to you by volunteers with Refuse Fascism. I'm Sam Goldman, one of the volunteers and host of the show. Refuse Fascism works to unite all who can be united to join in mass nonviolent protests and resistance in the streets and throughout society, growing to include millions and refusing to stop until we create such a profound political crisis that Trump cannot impose his fascist program or even maintain his hold on power. Big thanks to our patrons, everyone who rates, reviews, shares the show, and reps our merch. Every bit helps connect more people with the movement to refuse fascism and with this show. Here is one such review. On Apple Podcasts, Daddy Pops, I promise, not my dad or my stepdad, I asked them both, wrote a review, gave us 5 stars, thank you, titled the review Excellent, and wrote, "This is such an important podcast. Thank you for all the work you are doing." Well, thank you to Daddy Pops. And after listening to today's show, take a second to rate and leave a review, share the show, or hit up our merch store. See the link in the show notes. Today, we're sharing an interview with Channyn Lynn Parker of Brave Space Alliance on the Supreme Court decision ripping away access to gender-affirming care for youth, followed by some highlights from the Refuse Fascism rally in DC on June 14th. But first, as we got ready to record this episode, Trump bombed Iran. I found this commentary posted Saturday night from Rafael Caderas on point. Here's an excerpt, and the full commentary can be found at the RevComs on Instagram.
After bombing Iran tonight, bringing the U.S. directly into this war in flagrant violation of international and domestic law, Trump gave this deranged speech.
Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror.
Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. Even Trump's own intelligence agencies said Iran wasn't building a bomb. You know who does have nuclear weapons? Israel and the U.S. And the U.S. has used them on civilians, incinerating hundreds of thousands in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And since World War II, the U.S. has directly murdered nearly 10 million people in its wars in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and backed the murder of tens of millions more, supporting death squads, dictatorships, proxy wars throughout the world. Tell me again who's the world's #1 state sponsor of terror?
For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East.
Apparently this lying motherfucker is now trying to blame Iran for what happened in Iraq. Yes, after illegally invading and occupying Iraq, some American troops were killed by roadside bombs. Most of those bombs were planted by Sunni forces, not the Shiite militias backed by Iran. As for hundreds of thousands killed in the Middle East, it's the U.S., not Iran, the U.S. that murdered nearly 1 million people in Iraq.
This cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left.
And here we get to the heart of Trump's gangster fascist speech. Do what we say or else. Forget about Iran's sovereignty. Forget about the fact that you're supposed to get congressional approval to start a war. Forget about the danger of escalation, even world war this poses. It's just raw, destructive power. Again, tell me who's the world's #1 state sponsor of terror? As the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian said,
"We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and to to determine the destiny of humanity.
Salute to everyone who took to the streets today, demanding stop the unprovoked, illegal war of aggression against Iran. The Trump fascist regime must go now. Now we want to share some cheers. Mahmoud Khalil is free after 104 days in ICE detention. This Columbia graduate, courageous pro-Palestinian activist, husband, and father has been released. He was targeted and detained in an act of political repression, one of many attacks aiming to criminalize the pro-Palestine movement, to silence dissent, and to make an example of those who dared to speak out. But people did not back down, and now Khalil walks free, continuing to speak out for Palestine and for immigrants. Upon his release, he said, quote, "I just want to go back and just continue the work that I was already doing, advocating for Palestinian rights, speech that should actually be celebrated rather than punished," end quote. And speaking on the men he met in the immigration detention facility in Jena, Louisiana, he said, quote, "I leave behind hundreds of men who shouldn't be there in the first place," end quote. He also made this essential point, quote, "Whether you are a citizen, an immigrant, anyone in this land, you're not illegal. That doesn't make you less of a human," end quote. Also this week, cheers to the people of Los Angeles who put their bodies on the line to literally drive ICE out of hotels, thanks to noise protests, and away from immigrant communities. After the Dodgers banned Neza after she performed the national anthem in Spanish, they received massive protest. And then the Dodgers stepped up, denying ICE access to Dodger Stadium property. Good for them on doing that, and good for the people for making clear we are all choosing a side. We celebrate these as evidence that people can and must stand up, and that this regime can be challenged, that we are not powerless. Fascism relies on terror and violence to consolidate its rule. Any setback means that the regime must accelerate its vicious attacks on the people and the rule of law. With that, here are some of the ways this past week, this regime has tightened its fascist grip. One day after the June 14th protests, which brought millions into the streets to say no kings, Trump ordered his ICE Gestapo to escalate raids in key Democrat-led cities and launched more unhinged, revenge-fueled attacks on Democratic elected officials and all those who oppose him. A federal appeals court sided with Trump's use of the National Guard, ruling that Trump was within his authority in federalizing and deploying California National Guard troops to Los Angeles to suppress protests, overriding the objections of Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. That's right. They're paving the way for increased militarization, crushing dissent with troops on the streets. This is an ominous sign that the judiciary is not just enabling, but facilitating a fascist consolidation of power. The Trump regime has mobilized 4,700 U.S. military personnel, including 4,000 from the California National Guard, in response to protests against the ongoing immigration raids tearing through Southern California. Hundreds of troops are now deployed across LA, backing up a reign of terror being carried out by masked, unaccountable immigration agents, a Gestapo-style force that is violently assaulting, detaining, and disappearing people daily, immigrants, workers, and even U.S. citizens. This is what a fascist crackdown looks like. Military on the street, state-sponsored terror targeting entire communities, and a regime moving to crush resistance through brute force. In Minnesota, on June 14th, we saw a horrifying escalation of political violence, the assassination of Democratic Minnesota State House Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark. The killer also seriously wounding the Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette. The arrested suspect left a chilling quote-unquote hit list of potential targets that included Senator Amy Klobuchar, Representative Ilhan Omar, and the offices of multiple abortion providers. The deadly shootings occurred just as millions were preparing to flood the streets in protest of the Trump regime and its escalating assault on free speech, the right to protest, due process, and much more. As Will Carlos, writing for US Today, reported, quote, "Trump is dismantling the very office that oversees efforts to identify and stop such violent extremists before they strike," end quote. And Brad Lander, New York City comptroller and mayoral candidate, was arrested by ICE. For what? For accompanying an immigrant out of court. Let that sink in. Another public official, another member of the opposition party, arrested, detained, and interrogated by immigration enforcement. This is what fascism looks like. Listen to Brad Lander's arrest and his statement upon his release, followed by Senator Alex Padilla recounting his arrest and describing the moment we are in and action that's needed.
Do you have a judicial warrant? Can I see the judicial warrant? Can I see the warrant? I will let go when you show me the judicial warrant. Where is it? Where is the warrant? I had my hand here. I would let go. Let go. The warrant. No! Take it back. Take it back. Step back. You don't have authority. You don't have authority to arrest U.S. citizens. You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens.
At that elevator, I was separated from someone named Edgardo, who I had just met a couple of minutes earlier. Edgardo is in ICE detention. He has been stripped of his due process rights. I will be fine, but Edgardo is not going to be fine. And the rule of law is not fine. And our constitutional democracy is not fine.
You've seen the video. I was pushed and pulled, struggled to maintain my balance. I was forced to the ground, first on my knees and then flat on my chest. And as I was handcuffed and marched down a hallway, repeatedly asking, why am I being detained? Not once did they tell me why. I pray you never have a moment like this. This administration's officials, and maybe not all, but many Republicans in Congress, may choose not to do their job, but they cannot stop me from doing mine. And I refuse to let immigrants be political pawns on his path towards fascism. Again, if you really think this is just about immigrants and immigration, it's time to wake up. What's happening is not just a threat to California, it's a threat to everyone in every state. If Donald Trump can bypass the governor and activate the National Guard to put down protests on immigrant rights, he can do it to suppress your rights, too. If he can deploy the Marines to Los Angeles without justification, he can deploy them to your state, too. And if he can ignore due process, strip away First Amendment rights, and disappear people to foreign prisons without their day in court, he can do it to you, too. Because California is just a test case for the rest of the country. Last week, for many, was a warning shot, but I pray that it also serves as a wake-up call. We've now seen, since Thursday, Trump threaten to do the same in other cities run by elected Democrats. He's saying the quiet part out loud. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. We all have a responsibility to speak up and to push back before it's too late. So I do encourage people to keep peacefully protesting. We know that the cameras are not on in every corner of the country. But if this administration is this afraid of just one senator with a question, colleagues, imagine what the voices of tens of millions of Americans peacefully protesting can do.
U.S. citizens continue to be arrested by ICE. Jabez Garcia, a doctoral student at Claremont Graduate University, was arrested during an ICE raid at the Hollywood Home Depot. He was capturing the raid on camera when he suddenly became a target. This 37-year-old U.S. citizen was tackled and taken into custody. And what he said upon his release a day later after being taken, I think is something we should all take in. He said about his being arrested, quote, however long period that was, if an undocumented person ran away and got to get to his family and got to get to his pregnant wife, then I'm okay with that, end quote. And still, there's more. The Department of Homeland Security is now demanding members of Congress to provide 72 hours of notice before visiting detention centers. This is in direct defiance of the law that states no advance notice needed. Think about that. No real oversight, no real transparency, and zero accountability for the cruelty being carried out behind those walls. At the same time, the regime moved to gut Voice of America, laying off hundreds and silencing one of the last semi-independent international outlets funded by the U.S., a move straight out of the fascist playbook. And we are days away from the third anniversary of the overturning of Roe. 3 years into this post-Roe hellscape, the same Christian fascist logic behind Dobbs is now shaping the court's attack on LGBTQ people. There is one force that can stop Trump, his whole regime, and his whole fascist program in its tracks. attack, a mass movement of millions rising up in relentless, uncompromising, nonviolent resistance. But we've got to get serious. This fight can't just be about opposing one attack or another, even as righteous as that is, or even heroic moments of protest. It can't even just be a movement of disgust and outrage. The demand has to be unmistakable and unyielding. The Trump fascist regime must go now. That's the goal, and we have to organize with the determination to see it through. We need sustained, growing resistance day after day, night after night, until we create a political crisis so deep that Trump cannot impose his fascist agenda, cannot govern, and is forced from power by the action of the people. That's what July 1st through July 4th in Washington, D.C. is about. It's about building that. Thousands from across the country standing together in our diversity, lifting up a clear demand for the whole world to hear. Trump must go now, and showing our commitment to making that real. So I really hope that all listening will join us July 1st through 4th in Washington, D.C. In the name of humanity, we declare our independence from Trump's fascist America on July 4th. We're going to rally at 2 p.m. at Logan Circle and march to the White House to deliver the biggest chant heard around the world. Trump must go now. Sign up at refusefascism.org or see the link in our show notes. If you can't get to D.C., organize that week in your area. Banner drops, speakouts, rallies, marches. Be part of forging a nationwide movement, a nationwide force that refuses to normalize the unacceptable, that won't settle for anything less than ending this fascist nightmare. Look, we don't have all the answers. I certainly don't. But we know this much. Fascism won't be stopped by waiting for 2026. It won't be stopped by waiting for some savior from on high, and it won't be stopped if we do nothing. It will take people acting together with courage, clarity, and conscience. Let's be those people. This week, in a landmark and deeply dangerous decision, the Supreme Court ruled in U.S. v. Skrmetti to uphold Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth. With this ruling, the court has taken the logic of Dobbs v. Jackson even further, essentially gutting constitutional protection for trans youth and destabilizing the legal foundation for sex discrimination protections in the United States. Let's be clear, the Trump-stacked, fascist-stacked majority on this court just told trans youth across the country that their lives, their bodies, their future, and their rights don't matter. They ruled that states can ban life-saving care for trans minors and that doing so doesn't even raise constitutional concerns. This ruling functionally removes gender-affirming care from the realm of protected personal liberty and places it squarely under the power of the state to restrict. This ruling says Christian theocracy, not science or medicine, determines who gets medical care and what care they receive. It furthers the aggressive reinstitution of oppressive quote-unquote traditional values. It enforces patriarchy and a narrow gender binary rooted in and further fomenting the dangerous ideology that deems trans folks as subhuman, placing them on the trajectory towards a genocide. As Chris Geidner, legal journalist, put it, quote, in its U.S. v. Skrmetti ruling, the Supreme Court's Republican appointees shaved off the edges, if not more central part of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause in order to uphold laws that bar an exceptionally small number of teens from receiving a type of medical care that only one group of teens need, end quote. Skrmetti is a direct continuation of the fascist logic of Dobbs that no constitutional protection exists for bodily autonomy unless it was explicitly recognized by those who wrote the Constitution, many of whom owned slaves, denied women legal personhood, and saw LGBTQ people as criminals or deviants. This is not about neutrality or originalism. This is theocratic patriarchy being written into law. And this ruling comes during Pride Month, a time meant to celebrate the dignity, defiance, and liberation struggles of queer and trans people. But instead of celebration, we're met with state violence from the highest court in the land. This week, the Trump regime deliberately shut down the only federally funded LGBTQ youth suicide prevention hotline. No explanation, just another cruel act in a larger campaign to erase queer and trans lives. What kind of regime defunds lifelines for youth in crisis? And while the Supreme Court escalated this attack, too many were silent. Shout out and solidarity to the gender liberation movement, who led fierce, beautiful, defiant protests outside the Supreme Court this week. They engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience. Members of the group took their hormone therapy in front of the Supreme Court. And it is so important that this action took place, that people saw that there was a force refusing to be silent and refusing to accept these terms. And you can see in the the show notes a link to some of their protests. This decision isn't just about Tennessee. It's not even just about trans youth. It's about whether any of us will be allowed to live with freedom over our identities and futures and, yes, bodies. Are we okay with the humanity of our trans siblings, our non-binary siblings being erased? A whole people's erased without their bodies maybe killed. Are we okay with that? And if we're not, then it's time that we get loud and act in the name of humanity to refuse a fascist America, to remove the fascist Trump regime. Again, as we approach this horrific of 3-year anniversaries of Dobbs, let's stop pretending that these rulings are isolated. They are coordinated assaults, and we need coordinated resistance. To everyone listening, the time is now, not to adapt, not to wait, but to demand. Trump must go now in our millions, not stopping until that demand is won. For more, here is my interview with Channyn Lynn Parker, recorded on June 19th. Yesterday, in a 6-3 ruling, the Trump-stacked, fascist-stacked Supreme Court upheld a Tennessee law banning gender-affirming care to minors. In Justice Sotomayor's dissent, she wrote, quote, Tennessee's law expressly classifies on the basis of sex and transgender status, so the Constitution and settled precedent require the court to subject it to intermediate scrutiny. The majority contorts logic and precedent to say otherwise, inexplicably declaring it must uphold Tennessee's categorical ban on life-saving medical treatment, so long as, quote, any reasonably conceivable state of facts, end quote, might justify it. Thus, the majority subjects a law that plainly discriminates on the basis of sex to mere rational basis review by retreating from meaningful judicial review exactly where it matters most. The court abandons transgender children and their families to political whims. In sadness, I dissent, end quote. To talk about this ruling and its implications, I am so pleased to welcome Channyn Lynn Parker, Chief Executive Officer of Brave Spaces Alliance. She is a dedicated advocate and leader within Chicago's LGBTQ plus community, and I'm so glad to get to chat with her today.
Hello.
Welcome, Channyn. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
How did you first hear about the ruling, and what was your immediate reaction?
I first heard about the ruling through a community colleague of mine who posted the unfortunate news that Skrmetti was being upheld. And the first thing that came to my mind, I'm going to say even more sadly, was I'm not surprised that we are living in this moment now where things are happening that just 10 years ago, maybe just a year ago, we wouldn't have even imagined. Unfortunately, this onslaught that's being supported by the very people seated in places that are meant to protect us are now using this to dismantle and harm our very liberties that are supposed to be protected. Justice Sotomayor said it beautifully, yet so tragically painful. Sadly, I dissent. Yeah, so that's how I heard about it.
I'm wondering, as someone who's been on the front lines for trans liberation, you spoke about this some, but how are you making sense of this moment? Not just legally, but like, what do you think it says about our moral and social situation right now where such a decision can come down?
Morally, it says that this society that we live in is only invested in very binary function. Black, white, boy, girl, male, female, without any space for nuance or complexity. I am not so certain that these people don't know that that complexity exists. They simply seek to repress it and flat out destroy it. We live in this society that we're taught things like manifest destiny. We're taught of this mythos of America's nobility, that they somehow are on this perpetual global police beat, if you will, protecting the sanctity of democracy, when in fact, that's furthest from the truth. This is all designed for supremacy and to rule over. I see trans people as being the first casualties of many. I've said this before in other speeches that trans people were the appetizer, but we are all on the menu. And that's just the reality of it, right? Is that there's more to come. And my gender affirming care being on the line means that other people's reproductive rights, ability to choose, and so many other things are also at stake here.
Such an important reminder. I'm wondering, for those who aren't as familiar with the case, if in simple terms you could kind of just break down what this ruling means. What did the court decide?
So the court decided that gender affirming care is a states' rights matter, and that Tennessee is well within their right to deny young people gender affirming care. Simple as that. There is a family who fought for their child's right to access gender affirming care within the state of Tennessee, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the ban. Simple as that. And the dangerous thing about this is that this is going to give precedence to so many other things. If you all recall, if you're history buffs, there was a huge states' rights thing that we fought over, about 100-something years ago, called the Civil War. And they said, well, it's a states' right. Slavery is a states' right, and the federal government should not get involved with that. So you see, it starts off with Skrmetti. It starts off with gender-affirming care for children. But next year, what will it be? So in simple terms, that's what Skrmetti is.
Thanks for that. And I think it's important for listeners to know that the American Medical Association came out right away condemning the ruling. The whole medical community really is appalled by such a decision that takes away care decisions that are the realm of physicians and patients and families and makes it the purview of the state, which is extremely dangerous, as you said, really for everyone. I was wondering, what do you think the impact will be for other states? How does it work from here? If Tennessee's ban is upheld, what does that mean for the other states? Does it greenlight all of those bans? I think it's 20-something states had similar bans on the books or were trying to have. Could you clarify for us?
Other states definitely do have bans on the books. And now what this does is it will embolden and empower those states to do similar things that could look like these ridiculous religious freedoms acts, meaning things like, I have the right to not fill a prescription based off of my religious beliefs. I have the right to not marry same gender loving folks. But also, too, what sends chills up my spine is I am fearful that in the states where gender affirming care for young people is still legal, that states may go after doctors who perform gender affirming care on residents of the states where it is banned. We may see a sort of bounty hunting, if you will. I know that when the overturning of Roe versus Wade happened, we saw states saying explicitly, we will come after individuals who seek abortion care in other states. So I am afraid that this will similarly happen to children or families who are seeking gender affirming care for their young people. Who's to say if somebody from Tennessee doesn't come to Illinois that they will not be hunted? Now, what I can say in rebuttal to my statement is Illinois has already made a promise that they will not allow that to happen, but it's just the simple fact that they would try to pursue. When we replay this conversation next year, I would be interested to know how much has come to life.
Very important warning. And your comment about what happened after Dobbs, we're still seeing these cases come to light. I was reading that 44% of trans people, youth between the ages of 13 and 17, live in the 27 states that so far have enacted bans or policies that somehow restrict youth access to gender affirming care. And there's lawsuits on many of those, but most of them remain in effect. And now after this ruling, I'm sure that most courts would defer to this ruling and say, go ahead. That's a huge, huge number of vulnerable children that are stripped, in my opinion, of their humanity. And I'm wondering, for those that really don't get what this means for people's lives, could you talk a little bit about the difference that having access to gender affirming care makes, particularly for young people?
Life and death. Yesterday, I shared a story about a 16-year-old. This incident happened about 20-something years ago. 16-year-old walked into the emergency room, and she was presenting with severe shortness of breath, severely low oxygen levels, and she was admitted into the hospital because she had a pulmonary embolism. And this was from having to access black market hormones, because this young trans-identified woman was so desperate to align her body with her authentic self. Thankfully, after a week of being in the hospital, months of recovery and blood thinners, she survived, but it didn't come without cost, because now there's permanent lung damage. Happily to say, you're listening to that young 16-year-old young lady. It's me. No longer 16, of course, but that was me. That was me. Thankfully, my parents realized, okay, whoa, I can't let my child die. And I was put into safe, competent, and supervised gender-affirming care. I say that to say there is no world where we're not about to see young people go back to the black market. There is no world where we are not about to see young people risk their lives due to self-medicating, self-dosing, who are going to end up with extraordinarily high estrogen levels that could cause strokes, young transmasculine folks with skyrocketing testosterone levels, or just getting some bad stuff that they don't know what it is. We talk about states' rights, but I'll just even take this from the standpoint of the state maybe being a little more selfish in this moment. You're about to see skyrocketing medical costs because of these things happening where the hospitals are forced to take young trans folks who need to be treated for preventable harm. I see so many things cascading because of this.
I want to say that first off, I'm so glad that you got what you needed so that you can be here and advocating for not only yourself, but so many others. And that's precious. And we need to fight for that for everyone. You talked about some of the domino effects that this could have, the immediate effect for people that live in states where there's bans on gender affirming care for minors. You talked about what it means for other states that might be like, well, we're going to not ban it, but we're going to find some other ways to go about it. And you talked about the dangerous effects of youth seeking care and what it means to trans youth and trans people everywhere, that they are trying to declare people not existing. I was talking to a genocide scholar the other day who said something that it was just such a gut punch of they're trying to kill people off without killing their actual bodies, that there's a way that they can do it with killing who people are without the bodies piling up. I was just wondering, why is it so important to this fascist movement? People will be like, trans folks are such a minority in this country. Why won't people leave people alone and let people be? Why is this fascist movement so intent on erasing trans and non-binary folk?
Well, I can't get into the head of fascists, but I will say this, and I don't think any one of us can on here. But here's what I will say based off of a lot of the things I've listened to, a lot of things I've heard. We have these folks who are really obsessed with being pro-birth, not necessarily pro-life, but pro-birthed. These are people who are obsessed with having control over people's bodies. Bodily autonomy for them, for whatever reason, I have no idea, just seems like one of the most damnable things out there. This is my conjecture, but I've heard this on numerous occasions, that you have these fascists who are also deeply, deeply, deeply racist. and they are deeply afraid of diminishing numbers when it comes to the white ethno population. They have this twisted, warped idea that diminishing numbers will somehow reduce their ability to hold on to power. So we have to do everything we can. Deportation, subjugation, erasure, banning of your reproductive sovereignty. All of these things are in service of this twisted, warped Nazi idea of this supreme race. It's just bizarre. It's nuts. We've got a handful of very warped people impressing onto the masses these things that I don't know anyone, black, white, or otherwise, who wants this. And that's what this is. You know, you mentioned earlier about killing people in ways that are not necessarily in the literal sense. Well, we saw that same thing during slavery. You saw the investment in the body from a sense of being able to preserve something that is in service of building our society, producing a product, but they wanted to kill the spirit to prevent rebellion, to prevent you from going against their authority. But once slavery, chattel slavery, let me say, ended, there was no longer an active investment in your body. We noticed how the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow, all these American terrorists were not in existence during chattel slavery. There was no need. It came after. It came post-slavery because they said, since I cannot have an active investment in your body, now I will kill you. I believe what we're seeing is very similar right now. If I cannot have an active investment over birthing people's bodies, over trans people, over anyone that is out of line, I will kill you. And I think, Sam, that's what we're seeing right now. You know, we're seeing the same old playbook resurface in different ways, but it is all the same.
Thanks for walking us through that. I think it's really, really important. And I think it speaks to the way that this fascism is completely American. It's born from this country's history, and people will be like, Putin's puppet. No, y'all, this is American. And that doesn't mean it's not a departure from the way things have been, but it's rooted in things that are very American, like genocide and slavery. And I think that the sooner that people are able to grasp that and not just hope that wrapping themselves in the American flag will somehow protect them, it's not going to protect you, because that's where this comes from.
If I could really quickly, and I want the audience to hear this because I'm a very illustrative person. Oftentimes when we throw out white supremacy, we render this purely to race in its most basic of elements, black and white. No. This is not me saying this from the place that white people have a problem. No, white people do have a problem. The problem is white supremacy. Let me explain. Have any of you ever painted a house or a wall? Okay, so if you're in my house right now, I am in a room where these walls are olive green and brown. If I wanted to paint these walls, I would have to prime them first. A primer is a very thick, viscous coat of white paint. It eliminates, it hides, it erases any trace of what was ever underneath it. Individuals who have been generationally raised to believe that they were white, essentially all of the richness of who you are, all of your ancestry, all of the survivors, all of the individuals that came before you with their beautiful traditions and values and all of these things have been erased by this primer that has rendered you down to this minuscule identity of white. That is exactly what white supremacy does. This racial categorization has been assigned to you in order to ensure that you do not band together with other individuals who have like experiences. Also, that way they can maintain their power. We have so much alike than not. And they are so good at distracting us from seeing who the real villains are. And it is not you, and it is not me, It is them. It is that small group of individuals who play with us like these puppet strings, and they are deathly afraid of us waking up. Do your research on Bacon's Rebellion back in the 1600s when there were indentured servants, and all of a sudden, when they all banded together with the African slaves and the white indentured servants, they did some amazing things to the powers that be, but they said, no, 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 we can't ever let this happen again. And there came a separation of the classes that exists to this day. So I just want all oppressed peoples, even people who have been led to believe that they're not oppressed, to wake up. We need to join forces. We need to lock arms. We need to say enough of this. Down with white supremacy, down with fascism, down with all of these things that are designed to keep the wool over our eyes. I love when Marcus Garvey says, rise up, O ye peoples. We have to wake up out of this slumber and see where the real problem is.
Absolutely. And I think that part of it is there is this triad that fascism foments and relies upon. It's the white supremacy, it's the male supremacy, and it's the really just crudest America firstism, the American chauvinism. And I think that part of what we're seeing is we need to take it all on, you know? And I think that part of what I think has marked at least the current iteration of the Trump regime is that people wanted to dismiss that Christian fascism was still a big factor. They thought, oh, that was so Trump 1.0 because of the attacks on women being such a paramount part of his program the first time. But no, folks, this is what we are seeing. What Skrmetti is what they want to make the law of the land. And I just think it's important for people to come to grips with, they're not going to go away on their own. It's up to us. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I think that for a lot of people, there's like, oh, well, at least we have the courts, or at least we have the institutions. And you just see right now that, let's be real, the Democratic Party is terrible when it comes to trans rights, just throwing our trans folks under the bus, and the court's not stopping it. And so I just wanted to get your sense of, what do you tell people who right now are like looking at it and being like, ooh, it's not going to be the courts, it's not going to be some kind of opposition party. What can we do?
Settle into the idea that we save us. And I know that's a very loaded statement, but no one's coming to save you. And that's been our problem for quite some time, is that we're always looking for the next great leader. And the next great leader is in the mirror. Look at yourself. We have to get together, figure out what our plan is. And some of what we come up with that is a plan might not be the most pleasant of things. I'll just leave it there. Everywhere we have been taught to turn is failing us. And we have to remember something. Those systems were not designed for us, meaning trans people, meaning women's rights, meaning Black folks, meaning brown folks, meaning women, meaning so many. If you are not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, according to, the foundation of this country, you're not in the club. You're not included. They're not talking about you. And I want to say heterosexual at that. This wasn't for you. When these courts and these laws and these things were designed, they were not designed with you in mind. We're so fixated on what I call the blip, BLIP. What I mean by the blip is we've enjoyed 50-ish years of unprecedented movement. Brown versus Board of Education, Sandra Day O'Connor, Thurgood Marshall, Roe v. Wade, Bostock, my God, Obergefell, all of these things. But if we look at the broader picture of this country, you're talking about a very narrow sliver of time. The broader picture of the country has been slavery, has been women's suppression, has been internment camps, has been all of these things. So we're just going back to this country's original standard. And we need to decide, are we going to let them do this? Because no one's coming to save us, y'all. It grates my skin to hear someone say, well, they're going to get sued. What? What? Are you kidding me? Stop saying that to me. Well, the courts are never going to allow this. What? Trump's going to get to, he doesn't care. Well, when the midterms come, we're going to take this back over. Oh my gosh, please stop it. Wake up. That slapping you hear is me slapping my knee. Wake up, everyone. These people don't fight fair. Hell, I'm not even sure if they won this election for real. Just stop. Stop it. They're afraid of us for a reason, because we do in fact have the numbers. Look around. But again, they want you to believe you don't. They want you to buy into the myth of white supremacy. They want you to believe that coal mines are coming back and it's your fault because I don't have this over here. And look, you're never going to sit on this freaking Gone with the Wind veranda plantation, drinking mint juleps and fanning yourself. That's never going to happen. Matter of fact, I guarantee you probably don't even descend from that class of people in the first place. So join us. You don't have anything else to lose, I promise you.
As we close out the conversation, I had two connected questions. I wanted to first ask the young people that you might work with or who are scared right now, what do you say? What should we be saying to our youth who are reeling from being told that they aren't full human beings, basically?
Find your community. Unlike times before, we do have a community now. We are more interconnected than we ever have been, and you are not suffering alone. We live, regardless of anything, in an extraordinary time where we have social media, we have ways of connecting that have, make the past 20 years look just unbelievably advanced. So find your people, find your community, figure out how much information you're going to take in and what is your barrier, what is your boundary, I should say, I'm sorry. Fight against misinformation. Don't spread it. I would also say feel the fear and do it anyway, because we need you. I'm aging. I, under normal circumstances, will be an elder, and I need these young people to pick up the torch and pick up the fight where I left off and so many others. And I hope one day, if my voice during this podcast somehow archived, please run it back. Do me the extreme pleasure or honor of saying, hey, we won this. We heard you. We rallied around that. We fought. There are going to be losses, but I promise you there will also be tremendous wins. But we have to fight, and we have to understand that the models that we have come to rely on, throw it all out. We can't rely on those models anymore. They're not there. They're not there, baby. They're not there. Let it go. Create new paradigms because we need them. I need them.
And for the people who are not directly impacted, but want to be defending and protecting trans youth, what's needed right now? What does that look like right now?
Recognizing that you're more directly impacted than you'll ever know. Not to sound cliche, because I know we've heard this umpteen times, but it truly is. If they're coming for me, they are coming for you. My liberation truly, truly is bound into your liberation. So while the fight is mine today, I need you on the sidelines to be voting with some sense, holding these lawmakers accountable, not being silent, not being complicit, supporting the movement, supporting those who are out there on the ground doing the work. That could look like donating to organizations that you know are tried and true and putting in this work, but it can also look like making your accomplishment, because I think sometimes ally is such an overused word, making your accomplishment a living and breathing and active thing. You standing on those front lines with us saying, hell no, not today. Look, I've got a great friend. I know sometimes I get on her nerves. She's also my attorney. Lovely white woman. But I'm going to tell you something. That lady is 10 toes down. That is somebody who tells me, Channyn, make sure you've got your identity docs in your bra when you go protest. Channyn, where are you going? Are you going to this thing? Okay, well, you need to let us know. I know, God forbid, anything were to happen to me, I truly believe that accomplice will get out of their bed in the middle of the night, even though that this isn't their type of law. But my God, they would do what they could to ensure that I was released. That's what I mean by accomplices. That is what I mean. We need that. We need that in this world.
Channyn, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, to share your insights and your perspectives and your time with us. And for people who want to connect more with the work that you're doing and get involved, support it, where do you want to direct people to?
Go to bravespacealliance.org and peruse our site. Go to whatever speaks to you, whether that's donating, whether that's volunteering. I also feel like this. I am a pull-up type of person, meaning I am so confident in what we do as an organization. You don't need an invite. Stop by. We are open to the public. We're a public organization. I mean, come in, pop up, stick your head in. I don't need to curate or script anything for you. Come see what we do firsthand. Put us to the test. Hold us accountable. Because if you walk into Brave Space Alliance at any given day, you're going to see us doing the work. You can be like an old school neighbor. Pull up, knock on the door. We will gladly let you in and see everything that we're doing.
Thanks again, Channyn.
Thank you.
A powerful force is in motion across this country. Instead of cowering to Trump's threats, people have acted with courage and conviction to defend people under attack, especially our immigrant siblings, and defy Trump's acts of repression. On June 14th, millions filled the streets to oppose the fascism of this regime. In Washington, D.C., where Trump said any protest against his fascist military parade would be met with, quote unquote, very big force, over 1,000 people refused to be intimidated and joined Refuse Fascism in marching to the White House with the demand Trump must go now. Here are some of the voices at the Refuse Fascism rally in DC on June 14th. Ralph, a U.S. military veteran and retired federal worker, Jim Keedy, longtime activist, Sophia Zoe Kilmer, a civil rights attorney and trans activist, and Sansara Taylor, co-initiator of Refuse Fascism. Have a listen in that order.
My name is Ralph, and I am a 20-year veteran and a 15-year federal service retiree. I am pissed. My veteran colleagues was just sitting on the Capitol steps, and they arrested them, but these fascists could go in there and tear the place apart, and they're walking our streets today. This is not right. This is not right. What's happening to our country is not right. I have sworn to the Constitution 5 different times when I took my oath, and I will die for that Constitution. What they're doing to our brown and black brother and sisters are wrong. We all bleed red. We are going to march to the White House, and we are going to deliver a message. Trump must go now. The founders knew that if one man or woman ever attempted to assert themselves above the Constitution, above the people, above the rule of law, that it would create a moment where each and every citizen would be called upon to use their voice, to put their body on the line, to demand that such a person either step down voluntarily, be removed from office by the Congress, or be non-violently forced from office by the sheer will and determination of millions of Americans taking to the streets until that was realized. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in such a moment. This is why we have set forth a call to conscience for every citizen in these United States. This is why we have set forth a call to action for every American who believes in representative democracy. We are saying, each and every one of us, that in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. We demand the Trump fascist regime must go now. Now let me be very clear. Donald Trump is not going to go quietly into the night. He is just now starting to get a taste for his true fascist consolidation of power. He has already begun to ignore the rule of law. He has already begun to violate the right to due process. He is already using every mechanism that he can to threaten and intimidate elected officials, judges, the press, students, professors, veterans, and any citizen who dares to challenge his fascist tendencies. For the lives of people here and around the world, we must refuse unlawful and inhumane orders. We must fill the streets and town squares across the country in ever-rising numbers. Not stopping until we become a movement of millions. Not relenting until the regime is no longer able to implement its fascist program.
On June 6, 2025, Trump and MAGA came for transgender people in the military. People who served their whole life. He began to purge the military of loyal transgender people, costing us millions to retrain. But that's not the point. The proclamation states transgender people cannot maintain an honorable and truthful, disciplined lifestyle. I'm sorry. I'm not done. Their expression of their sexual identity is not consistent with selflessness. So let this be crystal clear to the world. This is about dehumanizing trans people and eventually all LGBTQ people as subhuman, to be treated in our society as such because the ruling class deems us unnatural. Get that through your head, because that's where fascism starts. But it doesn't end there.
After U.S. Senator Alex Padilla was forcefully grabbed by men in uniform, after he was dragged out of a public press conference, after he was forced to the ground and put in cuffs like a dangerous criminal, he came out in front of the cameras and said, if this administration can do this to a U.S. senator just asking questions, think what they are doing to the farm workers, to the cooks, to the dishwashers, to the day laborers. And maybe you don't have to imagine, maybe you're like me and you have been watching the videos, like the one on June 6th from a young woman who watched her father dragged out of a workplace raid. Now, before I tell this story, I want you to picture your father. Picture your father being dragged out in front of you as the words choke out of your voice between sobs and you say, "Te quiero, papa, te quiero. I love you very much. Dad, I love you," like this young woman said. And I want you to picture your father as he's being dragged away by men in uniform, as his whole world is about to change, mustering the strength and the love to keep his head high and to gesture again and again comfort and love to his daughter, to you. And as the vans on the unmarked, as the doors on the unmarked van close on this young girl's father, on your father, I want you to picture him blowing one last kiss. Later, when this young woman posted this video, she said that not only was her father taken, but two uncles as well. And she posted to her father, "I wish I had hugged you just a little bit tighter that morning." And I want you to think not just of that young woman, but of the millions and millions right now who are fearful. The mothers and fathers, the sons and daughters, the tios and tias who are terrified and thinking I should hug my loved one just a little bit tighter before they leave today because I don't know if this will be my last chance. This is just one of the monstrous crimes of the Trump fascist regime. This is why we say the fascist Trump regime must go now. But that is not all. Let's go back to the press conference with Kristi Noem. What was she saying? I want to quote to you something she said. She said, "We are not going away. We are staying here to liberate this city from the socialists and the burdensome leadership of this governor and this mayor."
No occupation!
This is the regime telling you that what their real mission in Los Angeles is. It is to remove the elected officials of that city and state by military force. They are openly saying it. That is a coup. That is a coup. And it is consistent with Donald Trump inciting and then pardoning the insurrectionists of January 6th. This fascist Trump regime feels that anybody else is illegitimate. No one else deserves to be in power by merit of not being part of their fascist crew. Think about what Donald Trump said about why he said Governor Gavin Newsom should be arrested. Trump did not claim that Newsom broke a law. He literally said Newsom should be arrested simply for running for governor. This is right out of Hitler's playbook. Arresting and silencing all opposition. Starting with targeted disappearances and then expanding it en masse. Purging the military leadership of anyone who would stand up to the fascist dictator, which is what Hitler did and what Trump has done now. And then parading that military before the eyes of the world to intimidate and terrorize even before it is unleashed to do its greatest crimes. This is why we are here in the streets of D.C. today saying no to Trump's fascist military parade and saying the Trump fascist regime must go now. My name is Samsara Taylor, and as Sam said, I am one of the co-initiators of Refuse Fascism, together with others back in 2016. We recognized then that Trump MAGA is a fascist movement determined to impose fascism in this country. Fascism, we were right, fascism is not a curse word. It is a qualitatively different form of rule. No rights, no dissent, just brute terroristic force in the service of a program of open and aggressive white supremacy, vicious and cruel hatred of women and LGBT people, and genocidal xenophobic America Firstism. And the lesson of history is that fascism must be defeated before it is consolidated, before it becomes too late. And today, Donald Trump is very close to consolidating fascism. And so this is the mission of RefuseFascism.org. It is to unite people from all our diverse political perspectives and viewpoints to stand together in the streets non-violently, but again and again in growing numbers and determination, refusing to your determination, your courage, and your commitment to the future into this fight. You got it. And on July 1st through the 4th, I'll talk more about this in a minute, come back to D.C. We want to be in these streets even stronger, culminating on July 4th when we will declare our independence in the name of humanity from Trump's fascist America. I personally come to this fight as a proud follower of the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian. He is the architect of a whole new framework of human emancipation called the New Communism. And I say this openly because some people go around and they say that should scare you. And they say that me and others from this perspective have a hidden agenda. But I want to put it straight up. There's nothing hidden. I have become convinced that to get to a world where all of humanity can live in peace, where everybody has their needs met for food, clothing, shelter, but also a rich intellectual and cultural life and community. To get to that world, I've become convinced we need a revolution. Guided by the new communism that Bob Avakian has forged. And let me say this, you don't have to agree with that to be in this movement. You don't even have to dig into that, although I would suggest that you do. But if you're going to form an opinion, I call on everybody to have the integrity to find out about Bob Avakian and myself in this revolution by engaging his works directly, not by listening to snark and rumor and anti-communist red-baiting divide and conquer. Have the integrity. And you can do this at revcom.us and at his social media on all the platforms at Bob Avakian Official. And if you go there, you will find somebody who's been ahead of the curve for decades, analyzing the rise of this fascism and what is needed to defeat it. But I will tell you this. It is from this perspective that I am 100% determined, sincere, and committed in standing with people from very diverse perspectives, uniting all who can be united to defeat this fascism. Because I recognize that the future I want and the future you want, even if it's different, neither of them, none of them is possible if fascism consolidates. So we need each other. We need to stand together. We need to debate the roots of this fascism, learn from each other, debate the way forward as we stand shoulder to shoulder, and don't let anybody divide us. Who have been standing up to Trump's crimes, who've been speaking out, who've been protesting, and to the millions that we expect in the streets today in the No Kings protests in over 1,000 cities across this country. These outpourings, these numbers show that there is a force in this country that is powerful enough to defeat Trump MAGA fascism. No, it is not the Congress. No, it is not the courts. It is the masses and masses of ordinary people standing up together in the streets. But here is something extremely crucial. Up until now, as righteous as it is, as important as it is, this mass protest, this mass resistance has largely been oriented towards opposing Trump's crimes, towards stopping this or that element of it, towards slowing him down. But I want you to understand, and we need to help others understand, that unless and until this fascism is defeated, unless and until this regime is removed from power, it will barrel over even the most powerful and righteous opposition, and it will move to consolidate. And that could come sooner than you think. So while it is righteous and necessary to stand up for trans lives, it is, but it's not enough. It is righteous and necessary for universities and law firms to defy Trump, but it is not enough. It is righteous and necessary to defend the students who have put it on the line
Thanks for listening to Refuse Fascism. Trump has shown with threats and action that he will not accept any restraints on his power. In his fascist America, whole groups of people that he deems as enemies and less than human will have no rights and no due process. This is the future Trump is speeding us toward, with disastrous consequences for all of humanity. No, now is the time for Trump to go. Tune in tomorrow, Monday, June 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for a Refuse Fascism webinar, Why You Need to Be in D.C., July 1st through 4th. We're calling for 4 days of nonviolent protests, culminating in the biggest chant ever at the White House. Trump must go now. Hear how you can help make this real. RSVP at refusefascism.org to get the Zoom link or see the link in the show notes. Your support is needed to grow the audience of this show. Spread the imperative and support the show by getting merch, see the show notes, join our Patreon community to fuel refusal of this fascist nightmare. You can contribute for as little as $2 a month at patreon.com/refusefascism, or for $0, share the show with others, rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, or comment on our socials or YouTube. It makes a difference and is so appreciated. Be sure to connect with us on social media at Refuse Fascism, including on Blue Sky, and find us on TikTok at Refuse Fascism, fascism spelled F-A-S-H-I-Z-M, to get around those TikTok rules. And as always, thanks to Richie Marini, Lena Thorne, and Mark Tinkelman for helping produce the show. Until next Sunday, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.